In this video, I'm going to talk about why I'm betting so heavily on content. So in the last few months or so, I have created this YouTube channel. For the last 3 years, I've had a podcast. I've also started some TikTok and Instagram just to play around. And in this video, I'm going to explain why I'm so fascinated on content and why I'm betting on content. So the core reason for why I'm betting on content is that it is the most valuable asset we have in the 21st century. Now, what do I mean by that? Think of any asset, let's say a financial asset, because most people are familiar with financial assets. Think of, let's say, buying a house with the intention of renting it. Now, if you buy, let's say, a second house, which is not your house, and you rent this house out, you have this house as your asset, and it's a good asset because the hope is that the return on investment that it will give you will be disproportional to the initial investment you put in, and it will be more long lasting and more sustained than the initial investment you put in. In other words, the pain or the loss of that initial investment is heavily outweighed by the benefit of the long-term and sustained income that it might generate. But assets don't have to be financial. Think of code, for example. Now, when you use Facebook, you're essentially using Meta's asset, which is this Facebook piece of code that they have written. So when Mark Zuckerberg was writing it when he was at Harvard, he was essentially creating an asset which can connect a billion people together, more than a billion at this point, without needing a billion people to manage it. It in fact needs very few people to manage it in relative terms. And the reason for that is because code is a very powerful asset which can get us the value we want without the time capital or the investment capital that might have otherwise been needed if it were like an in-person event. So I heard Daniel Priestley, this author of Key Person of Influence, talk about the key asset some time ago was agriculture. Like people who owned land, for example, were wealthy, and they were where the society's wealth and attention flew. But as time went on, that shifted from land to more of industries during the industrial era. That's when people who owned industries controlled the economics of the society. They were the financial hub of the society, but also more importantly, the cultural and the directional hub. So when the industry started, the culture changed into this 9-to-5 working culture, which wasn't true before that. The key asset of that particular era does control the culture and the generation and the economics of that era. And then moving forward more closer to today's time, the key asset was the internet, or more specifically code. So that's when the .com boom of Facebook and all of these fascinating social media that have come up now and are still functioning, like Google, they are one of the most valuable assets that we have. Now that all of these, it's very hard for now a new social media to come up because there are already these big players, and maybe there will be one or two that will come up, but essentially the riches of this era on code have already been built. But what does seem to be growing right now, and what does seem to be the key asset for today's age, 2023, is content. That's because people are spending time on internet, on the phone more than ever, and that's where the economy is, that's where the attention is. And so if you are interested in understanding this era and being part of this era, you have to bet on content. It's the most valuable asset we have in the 21st century right now. It's not just a random coincidence. I think it's also because our time is the most valuable resource we have. So what we are doing when we are creating content is we are essentially creating assets out of our time. So since my time is finite and limited, I can only be available to a certain number of people. But when I'm creating content like that, my time has essentially multiplied. Like I could just sleep overnight and still be 10 hours listen to my podcast, or through my YouTube channel now, or through the papers I will write, or the blogs I will write, or the publications, the scientific publications that I will write. And essentially what you're doing when you're creating content is making an asset of the core most resource you have, which is your time, and you're essentially multiplying and getting yourself more time, and therefore multiplying your impact. So that is why I'm betting on content in 2023. I think it's the most important asset we have right now. And if you agree with me, let me know why. And if you don't agree with me, let me know why as well down in the comments below. Thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed already, check out my email list. It's one of the best things ever. I send out cool behind the scene information, and I will show up in your inbox with some cool resources and information and podcasts and YouTube videos like this. So check out my email list down below.